I don't disagree with all of that, but I think it's very interesting to look at that in the context of Reagan's personal view of communism, going back to the early days of his career. And I did a lot of research on this when I was out at the Reagan Library and tried to dig into this. On the one hand, Reagan had a view that communism was uniquely aggressive, terrible, dishonest, expansionist. He had this thing called this pamphlet that I think was a John Birch Society pamphlet called The 10 Commandments of Nikolai Lenin, which was all a forgery. But it had things like Nikolai Lenin says, the communists may lie, cheat, steal, engage in any immorality to advance the communism. Another quote from the 10 Commandments is, if it would be acceptable if 3/4 of humanity perishes if the other quarter became communist. That's actually up on the wall of the Reagan Library, although they attribute it to Vladimir Lenin, who actually existed, as opposed to Nikolai Lenin, who Reagan would typically attribute that quote to. But it's not, no Lenin ever said anything like that. So on the one hand, he has this view of communism as, the ripe fruit view. The communists will take Latin America, and then North America will fall into their hands like ripe fruit, said Lenin. On the other hand, he had this really unusual insight based on his common sense, which was that communism was an absurd way for people to live and that no one would choose to live that way. And I found they have some boxed files of things Reagan kept in his desk that he took from California to Washington and back to California. And some of it is, like old business cards and weird sort of junk that accumulates in your desk. There are also some speeches that he held on to. One of them was an essay he wrote in 1962 that was not published at the time, or delivered at the time, called Are Liberals Really Liberal? And in it, he essentially speculates that communism, there's a decent chance that communism is just going to collapse because it's contrary to human nature, which was, I think, an enormous insight, but also was a very embarrassing, naive view to have on the conservative right in the years when Reagan was running for office. And remember, he's elected in 1980 and surrounds himself with neoconservatives who hold exactly the opposite view from the totalitarian school, that Soviet communism is essentially almost a permanent fact of nature. It's going to be impossible to dislodge. And Reagan thinks actually they might just give up because it's such a ridiculous system. He was a lot closer to being right than they were. But I think he stopped saying that actually because even he was aware the expression on people's faces when he would say that was, come on, seriously, grow up, don't you know anything? And I think that kind of contradiction goes right on through his presidency, where he's simultaneously pursuing confrontation with this aggressive enemy, and on the other hand, thinking, any day now, they're going to realize there's a better way to live.
James, do you want to leap in before we open for questions?